All right, so I think we're going to get started here. We may have some people still trickling in, but we wanted to be respectful of time. So welcome everybody to Kakaako Improvement Association's August general membership meeting. On behalf of the organization, we'd like to welcome and thank everybody for taking time out of their day to come and visit with us. We're jam-packed with some exciting speakers, but before we get to that, I would like to just remind everyone of some housekeeping items. We do have a chat function inside of our presentation today. Please direct all questions to the chat. I will aggregate all questions and ask them to our presenters in the order that they're received. So what we'll do is we'll have each speaker present. We'll allow a little bit of time at the end of each presentation for a couple of questions, but I will try to be as good of a timekeeper as I can to make sure that we have a good flow through the presentation. And as it wraps up, if we have any extra questions at the end, I'll do my best to address them as well. So with that, without further ado, I want to turn it over to our president, Mr. Kelton Kato. So if you want to introduce yourself, welcome to do so.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Michael. And thank you, Michael. Michael is actually a former KIA president. So thank you very much for hosting this Zoom session. I'm not familiar with Zoom and how to use it, so I really appreciate Michael's help here. Hello, everyone. My name is Kelton Kato. I'm the current president of KIA, and we actually have 12 board members. So in the interest of time, I won't mention everyone's name, but I did want to introduce Nicole Nakano, who is our vice president. She is on this call, as well as Kurt Murata, who is our treasurer. He is also on this call. And I encourage all of you to please go to our website, kia-hawaii.org, and then you can see a list of the other board members, as well as any other pertinent information to Kakaako and KIA. As Michael already mentioned, we're very fortunate today to have a great lineup of speakers, and featuring Dr. Jairus Hedges, Dean of JABSOM, the John A. Burns School of Medicine, Dr. Joe Ramos, who is the Interim Director of the University of Hawaii Cancer Center, and he is actually calling in from Portland, Maine right now, so thank you for doing that. And finally, John Leong, who is the co-founder and CEO of Kupu Hawaii. All three of these institutions play a significant and influential role in our Kakaako community and our state, so I think it's going to be it's very nice to have them here today and very interesting to hear what they have to say. We hope you find these presentations informative and beneficial. And as Michael already mentioned, we'll kind of have the speakers speak for about 10, 15 minutes, and then we'll have some Q&A after each presentation. All right. So without further ado, I'd like to first introduce Dr. Jairus Hedges, who has been Dean of the John A. Burns School of Medicine since March 2008. Dr. Hedges is an accomplished emergency physician, author, and academic leader. He is recognized as a leader who has strengthened the medical school by building vital bridges between JABSOM's community partners and collaborators. Dean Hedges is also known nationally as co-editor of Roberts and Hedges Clinical Procedures in Emergency Medicine, now in its 6th edition. Please welcome Dr. Hedges.
Aloha. Thank you very much, Kelton. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here and to be speaking with other distinguished presenters, telling you about how we're all working hard to maintain a business enterprise in the Kakaako area. And a lot of times, we're considered purely an educational endeavor, and the role with business is sometimes a little blurred. So I wanted to take a few moments to talk about that and what the medical school's been doing in the time of COVID. During this pandemic, the school has been incredibly active. We've not only worked hard to maintain our underlying support functions for education, research, and clinical service, but we've also worked very hard with our health system partners and with our practitioners in the clinics and the Department of Health to help the state prepare for and deal with some of these changes happening in our community related to surges of the coronavirus. So just a little bit, our faculty throughout this whole COVID experience have been delivering patient care, because a lot of our faculty, over 80%, have some clinical role in the community and help build a clinical learning environment for our learners. And they do that with a lot of partnerships, and including a freestanding practice called the University Health Partners that's connected to the university, and also our major health systems, where through contract activity, our faculty have delivered service. So it's very important both for creating this site where our students and residents and fellows are trained, but also in terms of keeping the skills up for our practitioners to have this sort of engagement with the community. All of our learners have been vaccinated, and the vast majority of our faculty have also been vaccinated. We're also, of course, wearing masks as we work here in the research and educational building, but also throughout the community as we do work, obeying all the appropriate precautions put forward by the CDC. But our folks have been very much engaged with helping guide the University of Hawaii in terms of developing processes that will help bring students back to campus safely, and to keep the families of our staff and our employed faculty as safe as possible. So it's been a very interesting and turbulent time, which has had an extra dimension due to COVID. We're also very proactive about working to bring in research dollars during this difficult time. And we've actually increased our grant awards by over 50% during the time of COVID. This is important for the state when we've had such a drop in our tourist economy, to have other sources of revenue, that which federal grants bring into the state. A lot of these have focused on health disparities, and some have actually been doing work on a vaccine for COVID, a little different variant of the vaccine than what we've been using clinically, but we've been working with Sologenics as a manufacturer to do testing on a heat-stable vaccine. Some of you may be familiar with the dependency of the current vaccines with cold storage, and some of the challenges that brings, especially in a tropical environment. So having a heat-stable solution will be incredibly important. We've brought about some innovations during this difficult time. We've introduced a concept called learning communities, which puts our students with exemplar leaders in clinical medicine in the community and allows them longitudinal contact to help them further develop some of their soft skills, as well as providing support to each other during this very stressful time, where part of the learning is in person and part of the learning is like this, via Zoom. We know that we can't do all of our teaching by Zoom, and so we do try to bring as much of the student body together as possible, and have been very proactive in this latest term to do so. But it is challenging, especially as the community rates go up. We have to, even though our students are vaccinated, maintain close vigilance with them. We're also doing more to build neighbor island training and have a number of programs underway for that. And then finally, we're working hard with donors to try to build scholarships so that our graduates will finish medical school with limited educational debt. We know that educational debt's a real barrier to getting our trainees to see themselves practicing in Hawaii because of the higher cost of living. So by largely choosing our students from Hawaii, over 80% are selected from Hawaii, and also providing significant scholarship support, we think we'll be able to help with the long-term physician shortage challenge. But probably the major thing that's been going on that sort of predated but has accelerated during the pandemic is we're changing our academic affiliations with major health systems here in Hawaii. We've always partnered to some extent with Hawaii Pacific Health and the Queen's Health Systems. But what we did was we sort of worked in conjunction, and all clinical operations, all strategic planning in the health systems was largely done within the health system. And the medical school sort of used that as a training site. But what we're doing is we're bringing our faculty practice into the health system so that we can integrate more closely and align what our faculty are doing in their day-to-day clinical work with what the health systems are doing. We think this will help us expand our clinical faculty as well as the research that they do. It'll help them stage the training that needs to be done to keep it consistent with the direction that our major health systems are going. And I think it'll prepare our learners and our faculty for some upcoming developments in terms of healthcare reimbursement. Healthcare reimbursement is moving towards accountable care organizations where there's more focus on population health, keeping the population focused than it is on delivering specific numbers of office visits or specific numbers of clinical procedures. And as that environment changes here in Hawaii, as it's begun to elsewhere in the country, it means we have to train our doctors differently. We have to have their incentives aligned differently to be the most successful in that environment. There'll be much more health teamwork and collaboration with our ancillary healthcare providers, our nurse practitioners, physician assistants, pharmacists, and so forth. So we're excited by this new alignment of what we're trying to do with the health systems. And I think over the next couple of years, people will notice a major difference in our ability to deliver our educational mission and do innovation in the healthcare setting. It'll also help us grow some new training programs. And I just wanted to, as maybe a segue to Dr. Ramos's subsequent talk, just mention that one of the things we're looking at is creating the foundation for us to develop new training programs, such as for medical oncologists, that'll help us not only grow the next generation of healthcare providers in oncology, but also provide a nidus for strengthening the research engagement of our health systems with the university. So with that, I want to thank everyone for their time, and I look forward to hearing from the other speakers.
Thank you, Dr. Hedges. If you don't mind, we did have a question that kind of came in, and I actually have a question myself, but if you're open to it, you did mention a couple of challenges that were facing, young doctors or young aspiring doctors to either come to Hawaii or stay in the Hawaii. Question comes from us asking, is there still a shortage of doctors in Hawaii? And if so, is JABSOM helping to address this shortage?
The shortage continues. And one of the interesting things is a number of physicians who were sort of late in their health career have decided to bow out of medicine because of some of the threats related to COVID. So that early retirement has created its own challenges. So we're doing a number of things, and I don't want to take the whole time to talk about our strategy around workforce, but it includes not only keeping the cost of education down, but also expanding the number of trainees. So over the last decade, we've increased our class size by more than 10 students each year. We're trying to build relationships so we have more training sites for students and to do more resident training. That's the training that happens after you complete medical school. And we know that the more training of residents and fellows that takes place in Hawaii, the greater opportunity you have to retain practitioners. But we're also doing that in part with an eye towards the needs on the neighbor islands, where some of the health demands are greatest, proportional to population. So some of our training on the neighbor islands will help, again, encourage those who are learning there to consider practice there as a great way to build upon their experience.
Thank you very much for that response. I mean, obviously, we want to see everybody have an opportunity if they want to pursue a career in the medical field, and all these incentives and different types of things will hopefully help lay the groundwork for that. My question stems from, kind of an industry, I wouldn't say industry-wide, I think a global-wide problem is that, training has always been best done, I think, historically in the practical sense. There's been tremendous amounts of innovation that has been done around virtual training and everything like that. Can you share with us if there's anything that's come about in the virtual space that is, revolutionary or helping the industry at all?
Well, I think there's great opportunity for technological developments with virtual visits. And I do know of some folks on the continent that have become essentially a virtualist where their only patient care is by virtual connectivity. And they are able to, through some pre-selection of the cases they see over 70 patients a day through their virtual office practice. Now, there has to be a lot of linkages with pharmacy, with imaging, and other resources you need, but that can be done. And that's something that I think we will see more of happen here. We're going to train all of our students and residents how to participate in virtual care, but our expectation is not all of those who go on with their careers in medicine will choose that as their primary focus. There's just certain things you can't do virtually. It's very hard to do a surgical procedure virtually. You really need to get in there and deal with your patient.
I would think it would be very tough to get a surgery done virtually. So yeah, we'll leave that for the practitioners. But thank you so much for giving us that presentation. We definitely appreciate it. I'll head it back over to Kelton to introduce our next speaker.
Actually, Dr. Hedges, I wanted to ask one more thing. I recall you mentioned that JABSOM was able to significantly increase, you folks were able to significantly increase your grants this past year. And I was just wondering, did you access new sources of funding, or was this just more different programs that you were able to pursue?
There were some grants associated with Department of Defense, but most of these were grants tied into National Institute of Health, an area where we've been fairly successful before. But we just had, I guess, access to timely grants focusing on health disparities and some of our underrepresented populations. There's great need because of health disparities in Native Hawaiians, other Pacific Islanders, and Filipino populations. So having programs that are designed to reach out to those populations and focus on their health needs has been very helpful. A lot of those are not done by the university in isolation. They're done with collaboration with community groups, because only by working with the community can we be successful.
No, I mean, I was very impressed to hear that. I mean, I think, the more opportunities to bring more money into the state, the better, especially for directed at populations that need them. So that's good to know. All right. Thank you very much for that. So next up, we have Dr. Joe Ramos, who recently assumed the role of Interim Director at the UH Cancer Center. And he previously served the Cancer Center as Deputy Director, Associate Director of Administration, and Cancer Biology Program Leader, among other roles, since coming to Hawaii in 2004. Dr. Ramos received his PhD at the University of Virginia Medical School and is a respected expert on cancer signaling and metastasis. He is fully committed to the Cancer Center's mission to reduce the burden of cancer through research, education, patient care, and community outreach, with an emphasis on the unique ethnic, cultural, and environmental characteristics of Hawaii and the Pacific. A core component of this work is to build and expand the Cancer Center's partnerships with the community. With that, please welcome Dr. Ramos.
Thanks, Kelton. And thank you all for having me here today. This is a great little group of people I haven't had a chance to speak to, I think, most of you before. So yeah, I've been here for a while now, almost getting close to 17 years, I guess. So I've been in a number of different locations during that time, but I can tell you the Kakaako one is the best. So we've really enjoyed our time. We opened up down there. I moved my lab into the Kakaako building in 2012, and we had the grand opening in 2013. So it's been a great location, especially with the proximity to JABSOM. I think I'm going to do a little bit of an ad hoc here, just like Jairus, but I can sort of spin off of what he was just talking about. We've also seen an increase in grant funding this last year or so. And one additional aspect, I think, of it is that during COVID times, I think we had more people writing more grants. That's something that they could do without having to come into their labs every day. So I know I myself put in a number of grants and have a couple of new ones to show for it as well. And we also tapped into a new funding mechanism. It's not new, but we have a grant called a CO6 at the Cancer Center. So this is a construction grant that we secured just a little over a year or so ago now. And this is to build the early phase clinical trials center that I'll tell you a little bit more about at towards the end of the talk here. And that's a fund that's $6.5 million, and it matches a $6.5 million fund from the state legislature for that facility. Basically that facility started out as kind of a discussion. So Senator Breen Harimoto came down to the Cancer Center. He was suffering pancreatic cancer. As many of you may know, this is a really terrible cancer. We don't have really good therapies or treatments for it. But Senator Harimoto, being the kind of guy he was, wanted to know what he could do to help other people who were suffering these kinds of cancers, which we didn't have good treatments for yet. And so the discussion got around to the idea that, really the medicines of the future come from early phase clinical trials. And so we started discussing that with him. He had some familiarity with the idea given his situation. And so he went and led the Senate in approving and getting these capital improvement funds to put in this early phase clinical trial center here so that we could bring new trials for people to Hawaii so they don't have to go to the mainland for these kinds of treatments. These really are kind of the early phase trials are really the ones for the patients who are the furthest along. They've tried every other treatment and nothing is working. So now they want to try what are the treatments that are coming down the line. And this is what we'd be able to provide access to with the early phase clinical trial center. So that's what that's all about. So some of our funding has come from that particular initiative. I'll probably tell you a little about that again here towards the end. But let me give you a little overview of the Cancer Center. I know most of you kind of have an idea about it, but let me break it down for you a little bit. So first thing is, the Cancer Center has an NCI designation, and we talk about that a lot, but most people don't quite know what it means. First of all, the NCI designation comes with funding, so that's one of our large grants. And that funding and that we get that reviewed every 5 years. And what they come in and they want to know about is what high quality research are we doing? We need to be doing the very best research, but that research also has to serve the islands. It has to serve the people that you are surrounded by. And we call that the catchment area. So we need to be serving the people of Hawaii with the research that we do. So it's all about finding out what causes cancer, new treatments for cancer in the islands for the people of Hawaii. And so that's what the NCI designation is, the very highest quality research for our community. So with that in mind, the Cancer Center breaks that down into a couple of areas. So the very first line of attack is you don't want to get cancer. That's the best case scenario. So we need to know what causes cancer in our islands, specifically in the islands of Hawaii. And we also have a larger catchment across the Pacific. We have a lot of activity in Guam, American Samoa. So I have a pretty broad catchment. So what causes cancers here? That's what our epidemiology program is all about. So they've been on the ground looking and doing a study that's called the Multi-Ethnic Cohort now for the last 26, 27 years. That study has about 200,000 people. It's a study that we do with USC in Southern California. And so we basically follow those people now for the last 25 years, and they fill out little surveys every few years. We have some samples, some bio samples from them. And this creates an amazing data repository. So you can ask questions like, if someone eats a lot of soy, do they have a higher incidence of breast cancer? Does coffee affect liver cancer incidence? These are the kinds of questions that you can go in and probe with access to this data. And this has become a world-renowned resource that the Cancer Center offers. There have been over 800 papers on this. People are using the resource from all around the world, and it's had a huge impact on how we look at nutrition and cancer in the country and more broadly speaking. So our epidemiologists are really amongst the first who've looked at nutrition and how it affects cancer. They've expanded that over the years. There's something called the microbiome. These are the bacteria that live and line your guts. And those bacteria break down meats, for example, when you eat meats, and that might have certain effects in the incidence of cancer. So your microbiome can also affect this. And this is something that we're really amongst the cutting edge on as well. So first, we want to know what causes cancer. So once you know, you need to do something about it. You know that smoking causes cancer. So if any of you are doing that, you quit smoking, that'll reduce your chances of getting cancer pretty much immediately. But there are other things that are more subtle. So once we learn these things, we need to have programs. We need to educate our people so that they can do better and have access to the information they need to make the decisions to reduce their incidence of cancers. And so that's what our population scientists do, the ones that are on the prevention side. So they then take what we learn from the epidemiologists and they create programs that are culturally appropriate. We have one program, for example, to try and educate Native Hawaiians about how to do better screening for colon cancers. And so that's entirely done with the sort of the men-focused kinds of discussion groups and are very much in tune with the Native Hawaiian culture. And how that we utilize some of that knowledge to help educate them. We've had a lot of screening done in those groups, and we've even caught a couple of cancers early on. So that's one example of how we can create culturally appropriate and get that out there to the people so they understand how they can improve their chances of not getting cancer. So better screening. Once there are certain cancers, though, that we're still going to have cancers right now. If you get cancer, that's when our clinical trials operation comes into effect and those clinicians that we work with. So we work with a consortium of hospitals, just like Jairus was telling you about JABSOM. We have the Hawaii Cancer Consortium. JABSOM is one of the members of that. We work very closely with Dean Hedges. But we also work closely with the Queens Medical Center, with Hawaii Pacific Health. And more recently, we've added Adventist Health Castle to the group, HMSA as part of the group, and Kuakini. And so they've all come together to create a 501c3. And basically, the funds that they contribute all go towards clinical trials in the clinical trials office. So this is so that we can bring in these new clinical trials to the people of Hawaii. Some of these are later stage trials, so they've been tested before, but this is what we're trying to lift with the Early Phase Clinical Trials Center as well. So if you get cancer, we need to bring in the very best trials for you. The very best cancer care comes with those trials. And we do that with our partners in the hospital. So also, like JABSOM, we're very much built on partnerships, breaking silos. We work with anybody who wants to help reduce the burden of cancer in Hawaii. But there are some types of cancers we don't really have good treatments for. And so that's where we have to find the medicines of tomorrow, if you will, the cures of the future. Now, clinical trials are where we test those once we have new things to test. But to get those new things to test, we have our cancer biologists on the ground, and they're in there. And this is the group I'm a part of. What we are doing is we're trying to look at cancers, understand what causes the cancers to progress, what causes carcinogenesis, what causes the cancers themselves, how do they metastasize? This is what I work on. What are those processes in the tumor cells that make them break free of the original tumor and go to the lung or go to the brain and cause the damage that will eventually end up causing the patient to succumb to the cancer. So this is where we need to do the work to find the cures of tomorrow. So once I identify these new mechanisms, I find ways to target them with different new therapeutic drugs. So this is what we are working on to develop new drugs, new diagnostics, and new types of therapy. So that's the cancer cures of tomorrow. Once we have those in hand, we again go back and do the clinical trials to test them out in people. And so that's kind of an overview of how we work at the Cancer Center. With those clinical trials and with those therapeutics, I'll kind of end on that area, kind of looking forward now. We've been here for 50 years. We started out as a small group up in Manoa, moved to be adjacent to Queens at the Queens buildings over there. and then finally came down to Kakaako. Now, what are we going to do next in Kakaako? I told you a little about the Early Phase Clinical Trial Center. We're raising money for that in addition to the funds that we got for construction. I'm working really closely with Jairus. I really believe strongly that collaboration by creating a division of oncology with the medical school so that we can have training programs for physician scientists, we can draw in the best physician scientists to join us. This is something I've hit up against before in the past. Without having the ability to have let the physician scientists come in where they can have fellows working with them to educate for the next generation of scientists, and without having in place abilities for them to do their clinical work, it's really challenging to get the best people. So working with the medical school, we're creating the division of oncology that Jairus mentioned, but we're also working with our clinical partners. We've done also in the past, as JABSOM has done, we have a number of our faculty are working in the clinics very actively in very different kinds of contexts and sort of developed ad hoc. I'm trying to work now to kind of, I guess, use springboard of what Jairus has done with his affiliations to get the Cancer Center sort of better affiliation agreements as well, so that we can bring in these physician scientists and have them working in the Division of Oncology and as well as in the Cancer Center to do their research. The last thing to leave you with is that we have also, as a part of that Early Phase Clinical Trial Center, a sort of a vision of bringing in new biotech. So we have space on the 3rd and 4th floor of the Cancer Center that we aren't able to fill in just yet. We're trying to raise funds for that and trying to build out space that could be utilized for biotech space. And so we're working with our Office of Research up in Manoa to try and find ways to do biotech development. And we're looking to see if we can find different biotech companies that might want to come and utilize this space. So that's something that we could also envision down the road. And again, this is something that our own faculty could utilize. If you create your own drugs, I have some patents. In fact, one of my funding mechanisms is working with a company funding my research from Britain to develop one of the drugs that I've been working on. If we can get people like myself to create new companies, we can bring those and that industry into that space in the Kakaako facility. So that's kind of the longer term vision down the road. And you can imagine this amazing space where we would have physician scientists working in the Early Phase Clinical Trial Center, having a division of oncology with the medical school, all working together with the companies, the biotech industries, creating new drugs, new therapeutics that could then be tested in the Early Phase Trial Center, and fellows learning all the way along, the scientists of tomorrow also being educated in these facilities. It could become sort of an engine of innovation down at Kakaako in the medical sciences. And that's where I'm really hoping for. And this is only going to be possible with partnerships with the medical school, with our clinical affiliates, with industry. So I'm going to land it there. I think I went over a little bit, but any questions would be welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Ramos. That was, your passion has obviously reverberated with everybody. I think I can identify with it as well. It's very, very inspiring. So great to hear all of the updates that are happening over at the Cancer Center. One of the questions from our group comes to us regarding the incidence of cancer. So is there any correlation in Hawaii's population that is saying there's more commonalities of cancer against any other states inside of the country?
Yeah, we have a higher incidence of a number of cancers, and we're trying to figure out why. One of them is liver cancer. So we do have active research in liver cancer. I'm actually trying to recruit new researchers that work on liver cancer for this very reason. I've identified that as one of the areas we need to do better at the Cancer Center. And so that's one that we're really working on. Pancreatic cancer, which actually is what Senator Breen Harimoto passed away from, is also at a very unusually high incidence in the islands. And so we're trying to understand a little bit better what's going on with pancreatic cancers. We also have differences and disparities for cancer. So Native Hawaiian women have a disparity. They suffer more mortality from breast cancers than some other populations. So we're trying to figure that out. So there are a number of these kinds of fine points of disparities, but also of incidence. You could actually go onto the website, the uhcancercenter.org. We have a listing there. You can look at, we have the entire breadth of cancer in the islands. You can see what the incidence of each of the different cancers is and how we rank is regarding to other states in those cancers. And some of the disparities are on that documentation as well.
Thank you. In building from that, I wanted to ask the question regarding a lot of talk that has been about COVID. You mentioned a lot of treatments that are being available. Do you anticipate, because of maybe patients with conditions that should be looked at, maybe have been deterred away because of the scare of COVID, that there could be a surge of cancer patients following the pandemic?
Yes, that's the very Akamai view. Yeah, we've done some studies, actually. We already are very well aware that there are people who've put off screening, for example, doing the screens that you need to do. Again, if you catch the cancer early, melanoma is very treatable if you get it early enough, skin cancers. If you catch them early, you have a way better shot at surviving the cancers. Colon cancer, the same thing. You got to do your screenings. And we know that people have avoided them because of COVID. They don't want to be around the hospitals, whatever it may be. It's particularly been a problem in the rural areas of the islands. So on the other islands outside of Oahu. So this is something we're all concerned about. Cancer centers across the country are seeing this. And so we're expecting that we're going to be getting a surge of late stage cancers at diagnosis, which is going to make those cancers harder to treat. So yes, we're very, very concerned about this.
Yeah, thank you for the news. We do have another question. So this is a question regarding how you personally found out about the connection of the microbiome as a possible solution to cancer treatment prevention, and what is the level of interest to further research this?
So this is something that our epidemiologists have been working on now for some time. They, basically, once we understood that the guts, that you're really, you're not just your own person, you actually are host to a number of microorganisms that live within you. Once this became recognized and the technologies were developed to really analyze those so that you could identify them carefully, we started to see that different people had different microbiomes, and that could have associations with their health, not just cancer, but with lots of different types of health issues. And so our cancer researchers and epidemiologists started looking at this and asking questions about maybe this has something to do with the association of cancers with red meats. So prostate cancers are higher for people who eat lots of red meats, for example. And one of the things is carnitine in red meats that gets broken down by these microorganisms. And so they started to study this and try to figure out whether or not that microbiome that's associated with the generation of the carnitine digestion had something to do with these kinds of cancer incidences. And so this is ongoing research. We're not the only ones doing this nowadays. There's a number of researchers across the country who are really looking at the microbiome and how that contributes. So it's still a little bit early days, but there's some clear associations. And so for other health issues and potentially for cancer down the way, changing the microbiome might be a way to change your potential incidence of cancers, especially for colon cancers.
Well, awesome. Very, very good information. I can't wait to go to UH Cancer Center because that data is going to be super helpful. But thank you very much for your presentation. I'll head it back over to Kelton and he can.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Ramos. That was very, very interesting, very informative, and sounds like you guys are doing a lot of good work there at the Cancer Center. So appreciate that. Last but certainly not least, I'd like to introduce John Leong. John Leong's passion for creating a more resilient Hawaii has inspired his many accomplishments as an environmental entrepreneur and community leader. After graduating from the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania in 2000, John founded Pono Pacific Land Management, LLC, a conservation and land management services company which today impacts important conservation, agriculture, and other lands throughout the state. In 2007, John co-founded nonprofit organization Kupu to cultivate positive environmental impact by focusing on developing Hawaii's next generation of environmental stewards and community leaders. Over the past decade, under John's leadership, Kupu has hired and impacted over 4,000 young adults and generated a total of more than 130 million in economic impact for the state with a 1-to-3 cost to benefit ratio. Please welcome John Leong.
Aloha. Thank you for having me, Kelton, and the rest of the board today. Thank you to the other speakers. It's so great to hear such amazing things happening in Kakaako. In fact, I get the privilege of looking out over the medical school and the cancer center from my offices here in the 677 Ala Moana. So, thank you very much for having us today. We have a little slideshow. If you can go to the next slide. Kupu was founded in 2007, as Kelton shared. And really, it's about getting young people involved in developing next generation workforce in the conservation and ag and sustainability sectors throughout Hawaii. I think as both speakers shared, next generation workforce is so important. It's the lifeblood of continuing on these important industries for our state, while also engaging people and engaging the next generation and developing them as we go along the way. And so we've really taken a three-pronged approach in our programs. One is hands-on service. We want our young people to learn first and foremost about character and growth and developing themselves to give back to the community. As they become leaders, we feel that the best way that they can lead is by growing and serving our communities. And the next is to develop their career opportunities and developing the pathways into jobs in related fields. Not everyone goes into a related field, but we're finding a really strong correlation between having hands-on experience and moving them into related fields. And then finally is to develop educational pathways. So we have everything from a diploma program in Kakaako for young people who've dropped out of school to postdoctorate and graduate credits that people can get, as well as college undergraduate credits that they can obtain. And we also provide about $1 million every year in college funding for our participants, in addition to wages that they gain with us to encourage them to go on to higher education. Next slide, please. So our programs are pretty diverse. They're across the state and up the archipelago all the way to Midway. We also have programming in American Samoa and as far east as the 9th island in Las Vegas in Nevada. But everything was started here in Hawaii, and it's based here out of Kakaako. So we have about 600 individuals last year in our programs. I'd say probably about half to three-quarters of them were on payroll, getting a paid internship with us, and the others were in voluntary roles. We have programs that you can see that range. The majority of our programs are based in placing our young people at different organizations, mostly government, nonprofit, and farms and agricultural organizations are our top partner sites. In total, we have about 150 different partner sites across the state that we support with our programs. And our young people either go as teams or as individuals. And we have some other programs that are really unique, some that are in the school systems, helping to create more education around conservation and sustainability in the schools, as well as doing some intercessory program as well too. Next slide, please. So to kind of just share what the impact that we've seen happen, we've had a little over 5,000 participants now. I realize Kelton has read that we have to update our bio info as well, but we have about 5,000 participants now that are trained and alumni. Many of them are working in related areas. About 80% in our surveys have reported they've gone on to a related field and are working in something around conservation or sustainability. And then in total, we've provided about over $6 million in college funding through our AmeriCorps Educational Awards. Next slide, please. In addition, we've seen some really awesome environmental benefits. And what's really empowering to me is that this work is being done by young people across the state. We target 16 to 24 years of age as our target demographic. And they're doing some incredible work. Conservation work alone is what you can see here in front of you. To put it in perspective, how do you think of 150,000 acres? Disneyland and California Adventure Park are 80 acres. So you think about 150,000 acres. That's a lot of land, and it's to see young people getting out there and doing this work is really empowering. We're modeled off of the CCC model that Franklin Roosevelt started in the 1930s, 40s. To get America back working after the Great Depression. And so it's very it's very appropriate, I guess, now that during the season we're seeing young people out there going and working and doing some really important work. Next slide. So we also look at the economic benefits. As Kelton mentioned, I have a business background, and so I can't help but look at some of the economic factors of the work that we're doing. So we were part of a Columbia University study, and in it, they're looking at the impact of youth corps, which came out of the CCC era. So we've been tracking this for several years now, and over the time we've seen about 150 million in socioeconomic benefits. That includes volunteer hours that were provided, educational benefits. In some cases, we have diverted costs. We have young people who come from dropping out of school and coming into our programs, and so there's the economic benefit of that they're not a cost to society, but they're becoming a benefit to society. And then our young people have gone on to work at over 400 plus conservation and sustainability organizations around the world. And some of them as close as home. We've had alumni in our sustainability programs that have helped to start up the Beaky program. And we have people that are working in administrative roles now at DLNR, as well as folks that are in great federal jobs for the Fish and Wildlife Service. So there's a lot of really great anecdotal information of young people who are now in the entrepreneurial, government, nonprofit sectors, in the private sectors because of this work. Next slide, please. So I'm here. I also wanted to share about another really great gem in Kakaako. Kelton can hopefully beam because of this one, because JKI is the one that helped us to build our center. So we're very grateful for your team and yourself, Kelton, and all the support that we've had to make this a possibility. If you're not familiar with Kewalo Basin, please come out and visit us. We have a beautiful center right on the water across from where 53 by the Sea is. We're on the other side of the channel. Or I should say they're on the other side of the channel from us. And we have taken a space that was derelict for about 2 decades because of it was built for the aku fishing industry. And when the aku fishing industry went downhill, it was left vacant for about 2 decades. And so it became just a shed, a roof and pillars and a fence that people were tying tarps off of, and with their tents all around. And it became known as the Crack Shack, a really scary place. And so we took it over in 2010 on a month-to-month lease and had our programs going there. And the major purpose of the programs there, so we noticed that 80% of our participants were coming from middle to below middle income families in Hawaii. And that wasn't intentional by design, program design. We had a broad demographic that we opened up the programs to initially. But we noticed that a big percentage of our population to get jobs, to move on to higher education, they need the basis first, which is a diploma. So we looked for a space to create a diploma, and that was the center. What's developed since then in 2017 was we got a long-term lease with HCDA, and we were able to then renovate the building. We had generous donations from across the state, and a fantastic contractor, as I mentioned, that helped us to put this together. It's a building that has a very minimal footprint. We have it's a net zero footprint because we have all the PV panels. We tried to design it in a way that has very low impact, and then we also had been feeding our students every day through the program. And so we needed a kitchen. And before, we only had a gas burner propane tank stove and a donated Kenmore refrigerator. But we were able to put together a business plan and got some funding from a foundation. And we put together a model to create a culinary program because we saw that was another area that young people could be hired off of. And we created a social enterprise there as well too. So the program has a few focuses. Next slide, please. So the first is that we have a diploma program, which is we call our community program. And young adults who have dropped out of school can get their diploma while gaining transferable job skills by serving with us in different conservation and ag projects. They also can be hired on through the center for different opportunities. Right now, we employ about 18 of the young people down there, and we have a wait list of about 50 individuals that want to be in the program. So they can get their diploma, they can gain job skills, and they're gaining life skills that are transferable. We also have a really amazing event space there that is run by our young people. We have professional chefs that are on staff, but in addition to that, they've trained and hired on our young people who want to pursue the culinary area. Others can then, our other young adults that don't want to go into culinary can go into our conservation programs or get hired outside of Kupu. But when they work with us, we have a social enterprise. Of course, pre-COVID, it was much more popular as an event space, but we're still doing really great work like catering and other events and activities that are coming out. We have a farmer's market that we participate in Kakaako on Saturdays. And our laulau even got written up in a food review, as well as one of the best laulaus that is provided in Hawaii. So we're really excited about that. Our program has done fantastic events for the State of the City events. We've done events for high-level CEOs and their companies and all kinds of different activities. So really exciting. And then the last part is it's here to be a resource for the broader community. We want people from like the Friends of Kiwalo to this group can come there to meet. We've had a lot of great educational talk stories. We have kupuna that come there to practice ukulele and music, lauhala weaving that happens there. So it's a really fun space that we try to make it available to the community when we can as well too. Next slide. And so we have this is just some statistics of what we were able to do in the center in the last year. But you can see some of the impact, and it's neat because the numbers have now that, especially that we're getting out of COVID, the numbers are growing much more than they were in 2020. Next slide, please. So just to kind of share, and I know we're kind of coming short on time, so I'm gonna skip the video, but we will send you the link, and you can send it, or if Kavika could put it in the chat box, people can look at it on their own. But we had a really great last year helping our community to respond to COVID. And, one was that we provided about 100,000 meals through the center coming right out of Kakaako, going into communities like Kahalu'u, Waimanalo, and Waianae to support families in need. We created jobs for about 350 displaced workers last year to get into a related green job field using CARES funds. And then we've provided greater educational access to people that COVID wasn't working, distance learning wasn't working for. We tried to create more of a hands-on opportunity to get young people that they wouldn't fall through the gaps and help them to engage in education through our center. And then finally, last slide, please. And so what's ahead for us? We're really excited about the opportunities ahead. We saw some, based on the work we did last year, we saw a bill get put into law to create a Green Job Youth Corps. So, and congratulations to Kavika and our team who worked so hard on that this past year. And it's great to see now that there is dedicated resources to some of the work that we're doing at the state level and also on the county levels. Exceeding County of Honolulu as well as County of Hawaii Island both passed parallel laws to ask for a Green Job Youth Corps in their counties. So we're really working to try to diversify Hawaii's workforce as well as infuse more of a sustainable focus in existing industries as well. And I think that we're also really excited about creating change, positive change for our state. So I will end it there. So thank you very much, everyone. And I'll take any questions if we have time for it.
Yeah, I think we have some good time, but I think Kavika submitted the YouTube video. I got a chance to take a peek at it. So very, very cool stuff. I had a question as it pertains to the center down in Kiwalos. You mentioned the event space, and is it only for corporate, or can, just regular, consumers, people just reserve the space? How's it work?
Yeah, absolutely. It's for individuals, companies, you name it. We've had a lot of grad parties there during COVID time period because the schools weren't able to throw anything, so people would do like small graduations or other things like that. So yes, you can go onto our website, and on our website we have a link for the Ho'okupu Center, and you can put in a request form there, and definitely if it's an event, just share that, or if it's an ongoing need, like we've had hula classes there, you can also request that kind of use as well too.
John, very, very cool information. Kelton, do you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, John and Kavika, just wanted to kind of ask about the Youth Conservation Corps, the summer program, as well as the, I guess you mentioned the community program. So if we have anyone that is interested in it, I guess what's the best way to go about that? Do they just is there someone to contact, or do they just go to the website? How do they go about sort of getting on that list, I guess, to be considered, and what's the process like?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, we have the website that people can log into or go on, and there's applications right online, so it's really easy. There is also contact information online for people to ask specifically about each of the programs as well. And our programs have different onboarding processes. Our summer program will start recruiting in January or December, January, and it usually closes by early March. And then we have our community program is year-round recruitment, and there is a list we maintain of people that are interested in it. That's also on the website, but people can also visit our center if they have a young person that they have in mind that may not be as tech savvy and they just need to talk to someone face to face. They can also go down to our center and make an appointment to talk with someone too. Yeah, Kavika, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, all I wanted to add, thanks for that question. So if folks go over to the chat right now, I added a link to the page that John mentioned. We maintain an open page for our programs. You can click on a big red button that will show you what's available and open right now. And so folks can see which programs are open to our youth. They can also see positions that are open inside of our organization. As John mentioned, one of the issues, it's a good issue, but in terms of the community program, there's so much demand that right now we do have a waiting list. We find that the biggest sort of recruiter or draw that we're getting are the youth themselves. So they're telling as they come into the program, they're telling their friends, hey, this is something that could be good for you. This can help you get back on track. Here's how it's helping me with my life. So we're seeing a lot of demand for that program in particular. But yeah, all of our services, all of our programs are available on our website. And if anybody has questions, you can feel free to follow up with John and I. I'll put my email address in the link, so you can feel free to reach out to me directly.
Well, awesome. Thank you both. It's just such a nice, refreshing thing to hear in the bright spot in the midst of such a chaotic time. So any of our interested board members or, guests today, thank you very much. Submit your youth as you will to generate some interest there. But I'll turn the closing remarks back over to Kelton.
Yeah, no, I just, very good. Thank you very much. Special thanks to Dr. Hedges and Dr. Ramos and John Leong. Great information. I think it's really exciting to hear all the things that are happening, innovative things happening here in Kakaako that's benefiting our community, not just within the Kakaako area, but obviously our state as a whole. So thank you very much for your time, for sharing your knowledge and information. And thank you to everyone for joining us today for this hour session. I hope you found it useful and beneficial. And yeah, just wanted to remind everyone again that Kakaako Improvement Association is here, and we're an organization that's been around for a long time. And I forgot to mention Sherry Goya, who is our executive director, and she's here on the call too. And she's the one who sort of keeps us all together and makes sure that we're doing what we're supposed to do. But the board meets monthly, and we try to stay in touch with what's going on in the community, and just appreciate everyone's participation and support here. So thank you very much. And with that, just have a great day. Have a great rest of your Wednesday.
Thank you, everybody. Take care.
All right. Thank you.